The tunnels of Horus, 9 were endless, dark, hot, and full of the sound of machines crushing stone. For years, an alien girl named Lyra worked there, her skin covered with dust and scars. She had been taken from her village when she was very young, sold to the mines where no one returned. Her eyes, once bright silver, had become dull like the gray rocks around her. Every day, she carried heavy tools and broke stones until her hands bled. Every night, she fell asleep beside broken machines, dreaming of sunlight she had never seen. The overseers were cruel, shouting orders through metal masks. They treated the workers like objects, punishing anyone who slowed down. Lyra learned not to speak, not to cry, not to look up. In that place, silence was survival. The air was thick with smoke and iron dust. The only light came from red warning lamps that flickered like dying stars. Her body was weak, but her heart still whispered one word: escape. One day, a tremor shook the tunnels. A section of the mine wall cracked open, releasing a cloud of gas. Sirens screamed, workers ran, and explosions echoed through the underground. Lyra fell to the ground, covering her head as fire burst through the corridor. The overseers shouted commands, but many were already dead. In that chaos, she saw a small passage behind the fallen rocks, narrow but open. Without thinking, she crawled inside, ignoring the pain in her legs. She kept crawling, even when sharp stones cut her arms and smoke burned her throat. She didn't stop until the noise faded behind her. When she finally reached the end of the tunnel, the ground beneath her collapsed. She rolled down a slope, landing hard on wet soil. For a moment, everything was silent. She looked up and froze. Above her was something she had only heard in old stories: the sky. It was gray and filled with clouds, but to her it looked like heaven. Cold rain began to fall, washing the dust from her face. She lifted her hands, feeling the drops touch her skin. Tears mixed with the rain. She was free. But freedom felt strange, heavy, and frightening. Her body trembled from exhaustion. She wandered across rocky hills, following the faint light in the distance. The wind howled, carrying the smell of metal and rust from the old mining zone. Her feet were bare and bleeding, but she kept walking. Every sound made her jump. She thought the guards were coming for her. The world above was bigger and louder than she had imagined. Machines flew overhead. Strange lights blinked on distant towers. She hid behind broken pipes and wrecked machines, shivering in the cold. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she could never go back. By nightfall, the storm grew stronger. Lyra found shelter under a broken transport vehicle. She curled up inside, hugging her knees. Her body ached, and hunger burned inside her stomach. She remembered the mine's rations, tasteless, gray paste, and almost laughed. Now she had nothing, not even that. Her mind drifted to the faces of others who never escaped. She whispered their names, afraid the wind would take them away. As her eyes closed, she heard a strange hum in the distance. It was not thunder. It was mechanical, steady, and moving closer. Through the broken metal panels, she saw a light beam sweep across the wasteland. A human voice came from far away, carried by the storm. She froze, pressing her hands over her mouth. Humans worked for the companies that owned the mines. They were the ones who built the cages and counted the slaves. If they found her, she would be taken back, or worse. The light stopped near her hiding place. She could hear footsteps crunching the gravel. A figure in a yellow repair suit approached slowly, holding a scanner that beeped softly. Lyra's heart pounded as the beam of light moved closer to her face. The man lifted his visor and looked inside the wreckage. Their eyes met, one full of fear, the other full of shock. For a long second, neither moved. Then the man whispered, "You're alive." The voice was calm, not harsh. But Lyra didn't trust it. She pushed herself deeper into the shadows, trembling. The man lowered the scanner and took off his helmet, showing his face. His expression wasn't angry. It was gentle, almost sad. He didn't look like a soldier. He looked like someone who wanted to help. But Lyra didn't know what help meant anymore. As the storm roared above them, the man reached out his hand slowly. "Don't be afraid," he said softly. Lyra stared at his hand, the same kind that once struck her people. She hesitated, breathing fast, unsure if this was another trick. The man's hand stayed steady, waiting, not forcing. For the first time in her life, She saw something in human eyes she had never seen before: kindness. And in that moment, something inside her began to change. The storm howled across the wasteland. Rain struck the cracked metal of the old transport where Lyra hid. The human stood outside, his flashlight flickering through the downpour. He didn't move closer, afraid she might run. His name was Eli Mercer, a maintenance engineer sent by the colony to fix broken comm towers near the mine fields. He had never seen an alien like her before. Thin, trembling, eyes glowing faintly silver even in the dark. She looked more like a ghost than a living being. Eli slowly crouched, speaking through the wind. "You're hurt. Please, let me help." Lyra didn't answer, her mind racing with memories of guards shouting and beating slaves. Every muscle in her body screamed to run, but she couldn't. Her legs were too weak. Eli saw the fear in her eyes and lowered his flashlight, making the light less harsh. He gently placed a small heating pad on the ground near her, then stepped back. "I'll leave it here. You need warmth," he said quietly. Then he turned away, walking back toward his vehicle. Lyra waited for him to return and hurt her, but he didn't. He just sat near his craft, letting the rain fall over him. Hours passed before she crawled toward the faint heat. The warmth spread through her fingers, and she whispered softly to herself, wondering why this human hadn't captured her. The next morning, sunlight broke through the storm clouds. Eli was still there, repairing his transmitter near the rocks. He saw her peeking from behind the metal wreck and smiled faintly. "Morning," he said in a calm voice. She flinched at the sound, but he didn't come closer. Instead, he placed a small ration pack on the ground and backed away again. Inside the pack was bread and water, simple, clean, and real. Lyra stared at it, her stomach twisting. She had not eaten in days. But she remembered the mines, the poisoned food they gave to weak workers. Eli saw her hesitation, tore the pack open, and took a bite first. "See? Not poison," he said with a small laugh. That simple act broke something inside her. She reached out slowly, taking the bread from his hand. As she ate, Eli watched quietly. He didn't ask questions, didn't demand answers. He just stayed nearby, checking his tools, pretending not to notice her fear. After a while, she spoke the first word he heard from her. "Why?" Her voice cracked like dry glass. Eli looked up, confused. "Why what? Why help me?" He paused, wiping rain from his face. "Because you looked like you needed it," he said softly. Lyra didn't understand that answer. No one had ever helped her without a reason. In the mines, help always came with pain. When night returned, Eli offered her a thermal blanket and a place inside his small shelter. She refused at first, sitting outside in the cold. But the sound of thunder scared her, and she crawled closer. Inside, the air was warm, full of quiet humming from the heater. Eli handed her dry clothes, an old technician's uniform far too big for her. She stared at it like it was treasure. Then, hesitantly, she put it on, her orange skin glowing faintly under the lights. Eli turned away to give her privacy. When she finished, she whispered a word from her own language, a thank you he couldn't understand. But he smiled anyway, somehow knowing what it meant. For the first time in years, Lyra slept without fear of being woken by a whip or alarm. When she dreamed, it wasn't of darkness but of rain and sky. Eli woke up early and started cooking something on a small stove. The smell of warm food filled the shelter. Lyra blinked in surprise as steam rose from the pot. He handed her a cup, soup. "Careful, it's hot." She sipped slowly, the taste strange but good. Her eyes softened, the fear fading little by little. Outside, the sun climbed over the wasteland, touching the ground with gold. Eli looked at her and said, "You're safe here, all right?" She didn't believe him yet, but his tone made her want to. Days passed like that, quiet, simple, healing. Lyra began to trust him, watching how he worked, how he spoke. She noticed that his hands, though rough from machines, were never cruel. He built things instead of breaking them. He fixed broken machines the same way he was fixing her heart, slowly, patiently, without asking for anything back. Sometimes she caught him looking at her, not with pity, but curiosity and care. And each time their eyes met, she felt something new, something she couldn't name. But deep inside her, the shadows of the mines still whispered. She knew freedom was fragile. And even though Eli treated her like a person, not a slave, she feared one day he would send her back. So every time he left to check the towers, she hid a little food and water, just in case she needed to run again. She didn't yet understand that Eli had no intention of letting her face the world alone. To him, she wasn't an alien or an escaped slave. She was someone who deserved to live. And under the rising suns of Oris, 9, for the first time since she could remember, Lyra began to believe she might. The mornings on Oris, 9 were quiet after the storm. Wind carried the smell of wet metal and soil across the empty plains. Inside the small shelter, Lyra woke up to the gentle hum of the heater. For the first time in her life, her body didn't ache from chains or labor. Her skin, once dry and cracked, began to heal slowly. Eli had treated her wounds with ointment from his medkit, wrapping them carefully. He didn't ask how she got them. He already knew the mines had left their marks. Each day followed a slow rhythm. Soft, patient, human. Eli worked on the damaged communication tower nearby, while Lyra stayed inside. She watched him through the open door, studying every movement. He never shouted, never rushed, never struck the tools in anger. When he spoke, his words were calm, and when he smiled, it was real. At first, she thought he was pretending. But as days turned into weeks, she began to understand that this man was different. One evening, Eli returned with a broken power cell, setting it on the table. He sighed, wiping sweat from his brow. Could use an extra pair of hands. Lyra hesitated but slowly walked closer. He showed her how to hold the wrench, how to twist, how to listen for the click. Her thin fingers shook at first, but he guided them gently. When the circuit lit up with a faint blue glow, her eyes widened. "You did that," he said proudly. She didn't know what pride meant, but his voice made her chest feel warm. For the first time, she smiled, small and uncertain, but real. Eli laughed softly. "There it is, that's better." At night, they ate together in silence. Sometimes, Eli told her small stories about Earth, about oceans, trees, and children running through green fields. Lyra listened like a child hearing fairy tales. She couldn't imagine a world that wasn't filled with smoke or stone. When she finally spoke more words, her voice was soft, broken by pauses. "What is sky color?" she asked one night. Eli looked up at the ceiling, thinking. "Blue. Sometimes gold. Sometimes gray. Always changing." Lyra tilted her head, trying to picture it. "In the mines, we only saw red from fire," she whispered. He didn't reply. He just placed his hand gently on the table, near hers. No words were needed. Every day, she grew a little stronger. Her steps became steady, her shoulders less tense. She helped Eli with small tasks, sorting wires, cleaning parts, checking sensors. When he laughed at his own clumsy mistakes, she laughed too. Her laughter sounded strange at first, like she had forgotten how. But it filled the room with something new, hope. Sometimes, when she caught her reflection in the metal wall, she didn't see a slave anymore. She saw someone becoming alive again. But healing wasn't easy. Some nights, Lyra woke screaming from nightmares. The sound of explosions, the crack of whips, the smell of burning air, all came back to her. Eli would rush to her side, never touching without permission. He'd sit quietly near her, speaking softly. "It's over now. You're safe." His voice anchored her to the present, pulling her out of the past. One night after a nightmare, she whispered, "I'm broken." Eli looked at her seriously. "No, you're just hurt. Broken things can't heal. You can." She didn't answer, but his words stayed with her, echoing for days. As weeks passed, their small camp became a world of its own. Outside, the mining companies repaired their drones, searching for fugitives. Eli kept their shelter hidden under old signal interference systems. He knew if they found her, they would take her away, and him too. But he didn't care. Every time Lyra looked at him, he felt something deeper than duty. He wasn't just keeping her safe. He was protecting the last bit of goodness left in that world. One morning, she surprised him by bringing a repaired tool. "I fix," she said proudly, holding it up. Eli stared at her in disbelief, then laughed. "You're learning fast." She smiled back, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. The fear in them had turned into light. For a brief moment, she looked like a completely different being, free, alive, radiant. And Eli realized she wasn't the only one healing. Helping her had changed him too. But somewhere beyond the hills, far past their quiet refuge, a patrol beacon flickered in the dust, searching, scanning. And though Lyra didn't yet know it, her past was coming back for her. Days turned into quiet weeks. The storms had cleared, and Oris, 9, looked almost peaceful again. The red rocks glowed under twin suns, and the cold air smelled of dust and metal. Inside the small shelter, Eli repaired a cracked generator while Lyra watched him with curious eyes. Her hands were no longer shaking. Her skin had regained its glow. She could speak a little now, her voice soft and shy. When Eli asked her simple questions, she answered with short words and half smiles. It wasn't much, but it was more than he ever expected. One morning, Eli found her standing outside. She was barefoot, staring at the rising suns. He walked up beside her and said quietly, "Beautiful, isn't it?" Lyra nodded. "I never saw this before." Her silver eyes reflected the orange light, like twin stars learning to shine again. In that moment, Eli felt something he couldn't name, something fragile, human, and deep. He turned away before she could see it, pretending to check his tools. They began to share small jokes. When Eli burned his hand on the heater, she laughed softly for the first time. The sound was so pure it filled the whole room. Eli laughed too, rubbing his hand. "You think that's funny?" Lyra nodded quickly, still giggling. That laughter broke the last bit of silence between them. The distance that once stood like a wall had turned into warmth. At night, Eli showed her an old star map from his tablet. "This," he said, pointing to a small blue dot, "is Earth." Lyra leaned closer, fascinated. "It looks so small." "It is," he replied, smiling, "but it's home." She stared at the map for a long time, whispering, "Home. I don't have that." Eli wanted to say something comforting, but his throat tightened. Instead, he said softly, "Maybe you do now." She didn't understand what he meant, but her heart did. Yet peace never lasts forever. Far away, in the mining outpost, a patrol detected an old power signature near the cliffs. It was Eli's signal beacon, damaged but still transmitting. Commanders assumed it was an escaped slave's hideout. Within hours, they sent search drones to investigate. That night, while Lyra and Eli shared dinner, a distant hum echoed through the valley. Eli froze, listening, his instincts sharp. He stood up and peered outside through the cracked window. 3 glowing lights moved slowly across the sky, patrol drones. His stomach tightened. "They found us," he muttered. Lyra's face went pale. "The mine, they come for me." Eli grabbed his gear and pulled her close. "We'll hide." Quickly, he led her to the old maintenance shaft behind the shelter. It was narrow and cold, filled with dust and cables. "Stay here. No sound, no light," he whispered. She shook her head. "They kill you if found." He smiled faintly, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. "I've faced worse." Outside, the drones landed with a metallic hiss. Searchlights swept across the rocks. Voices crackled over radios. "Thermal signature detected near structure," one soldier said. Eli stepped out, hands raised, pretending to be alone. "Just an engineer doing repairs," he shouted. The soldiers scanned him, asking for identification. His ID was valid, but the readings around the shelter were suspicious. They started to search, opening every door, shining lights into dark corners. Under the floor, Lyra held her breath, her hands trembling. She could hear their boots above her, heavy and cruel. Her heart pounded so loud she feared they would hear it. She whispered Eli's name, though he couldn't hear her. Up above, one soldier noticed footprints near the back wall. "Someone else is here," he said sharply. Eli's mind raced, and before the soldier could move, he kicked over the fuel drum. Oil splashed across the ground, and sparks flew from the generator. The explosion threw smoke and fire into the air. The soldiers stumbled back, shouting orders. Eli grabbed the nearest metal panel and hit the drone control unit, breaking it. The machine sparked and shut down. Amid the chaos, he ran back to the shaft, shouting, "Now, Lyra, go." She crawled out, coughing from the smoke. He pulled her toward the hills, the fire lighting their path behind them. The drones tried to follow but failed to lock on through the burning debris. They didn't stop running until the lights of the patrol disappeared into the distance. Lyra fell to her knees, gasping, "You risked everything." Eli knelt beside her, smiling weakly. "You'd do the same." She shook her head, tears mixing with ash. "No one ever did, until you." He looked at her, sat on his face, eyes tired but full of life. "Then it's time someone did," he said softly. Above them, the first light of dawn touched the broken land. For the first time, Lyra didn't look over her shoulder in fear. She looked forward, holding the hand of the man who had saved her, not once, but twice. And somewhere deep inside, she realized. She had smiled for the first time, not because of safety, but because of hope. The dawn was quiet, but it wasn't peace. Ash drifted in the wind, and the distant smoke from the destroyed shelter marked their trail. Eli and Lyra hid among the rocks of the western ridge, exhausted and covered in soot. The fire had bought them time, but the patrol would not stop. Lyra's eyes followed the smoke in the sky, her voice shaking. They will come again. Eli nodded, his jaw tight. Then we'll move before they do. He studied the terrain on his tablet, scanning for any safe route. The old service tunnels stretched beneath the cliffs, leading to an abandoned power station miles away. If we can reach the dam, we can hide near the turbine shafts, he said. Lyra didn't understand the words, but she trusted his tone. Trust, that was something she had learned slowly, painfully, but it had taken root. They traveled through the wasteland under the burning suns. Lyra stumbled often, her body still weak from years of labor. Eli helped her climb over metal debris and rusted machinery. He gave her water, even when there was barely enough for himself. When she tried to refuse, he just smiled. Humans are stubborn, remember that. She tried to mimic the word stubborn, and he laughed softly. For a moment, the fear faded between them, replaced by something lighter, something human. But the silence didn't last long. By the third day, the patrol ships had returned. Their drones scanned the valleys, their engines screaming across the sky. Eli and Lyra hid under the skeleton of an old cargo hauler, its hull half buried in sand. The hum of the machines above made Lyra tremble. Memories of the mines flooded her mind. The alarms, the cages, the pain. Eli placed a hand on her shoulder, whispering, "They won't find us. I promise." She wanted to believe him, but her eyes filled with tears. "They always find." He leaned closer, his voice firm. "Not this time." When the ships finally passed, they continued toward the dam. Night fell cold and heavy, the air thick with dust and mist. They reached the edge of a canyon where the giant structure stood, half ruined, half alive. Massive turbines still turned slowly in the dark, powered by the ancient river that ran below. The sound was deep and constant, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. Eli led her inside through a maintenance hatch. The air smelled of oil and water, the walls covered in moss and old warning signs. "This place is dead," Lyra whispered. "Dead enough to hide us," Eli replied, setting up a small light. For a while, it almost felt safe again. Eli fixed a portable transmitter, trying to block their trace signal. Lyra sat nearby, staring at the moving water beneath the glass floor. She had never seen a river before, and its flow reminded her of something she'd lost: freedom. "Water never stops," she murmured. Eli looked at her, surprised. "That's right," he said, smiling. She smiled back faintly. "Maybe I am water too." He laughed quietly. "Yeah, I think you are." But their brief peace shattered with a distant mechanical echo. Eli froze, recognizing the rhythm of approaching drones. They were tracking energy pulses from his tools. "Get down," he whispered, pulling her behind the turbine supports. Through the cracks in the wall, lights glimmered, red, scanning, hunting. Voices echoed through comm links, distorted by static. "Target likely nearby? Proceed with caution." Eli checked his blaster. Old, half-functional, but it was all he had. Lyra touched his arm, whispering, "Don't fight. They kill you." He looked into her silver eyes, glowing softly in the darkness. "If I don't fight, they'll take you back," he said, his voice low. She shook her head, tears gathering. "You can't win." "Maybe not," he said, "but I can buy time." He stepped out before she could stop him. The drones turned, scanning his figure. "This is restricted territory," one soldier shouted through his mask. Eli raised his hands, pretending to surrender. "Wait," he called. "There's a radiation leak. Your scanners are wrong." While they hesitated, he triggered the power switch he had repaired earlier. Electric arcs burst across the turbines, lighting the dam in flashes of blue and white. The noise roared like thunder, drowning their commands. Lyra watched from behind the pipes, her heart pounding. Eli's figure was a silhouette against the storm of light, fearless, unyielding. The soldiers scrambled, blinded by the sparks. Lyra wanted to run to him, but the heat and sound were unbearable. Finally, Eli turned toward her, shouting, "Run!" to the upper tunnel. She hesitated only a second before obeying, her bare feet echoing on the metal floor. When she reached the tunnel entrance, she looked back. Through the smoke and fire, she saw him, standing between her and the soldiers. For a second, time stopped. The human who had saved her again and again looked at her and smiled. "Keep going," he mouthed. And Lyra did, with tears streaming down her face. The air inside the dam burned with heat and smoke. Lightning from the shorted turbines flashed like trapped stars. Sparks rained down, painting the shadows in wild colors. Lyra ran through the upper tunnel, the roar of machines chasing her steps. But her heart refused to leave him behind. Every sound from below, the clash, the shouting, cut through her like fire. She stopped, trembling, her breath ragged. She had spent her whole life running, from pain, from fear, from chains. But not this time. Turning back, she followed the echo of his voice through the thick smoke. Down below, Eli fought to keep the patrol away from the control panel. He ducked behind metal beams, firing bursts from his old blaster. The soldiers spread out, their visors glowing red in the flickering light. "Human engineer detected," one said through static. "Eliminate the threat." Eli fired again, hitting a power conduit that exploded in a burst of sparks. He winced from the heat, but kept moving, refusing to fall. He knew he couldn't win, not against trained troops and machines, but he could stall them long enough for her to escape. Lyra reached the stairwell and froze at the sight below. Through the haze she saw him, blood on his arm, sweat streaking his face. He was cornered near the turbine core, his weapon almost empty. Something inside her snapped. For years, she had been powerless. For years, she had waited for someone to save her. Now, for the first time, she wanted to save someone else. She picked up a loose pipe from the floor and crept down the stairs. The soldiers were focused on Eli, shouting orders. She moved like a shadow, quiet but determined. Her glowing eyes cut through the smoke, silver fire burning inside. When one soldier stepped past her, she swung the pipe with all her strength. The metal cracked against his armor, and he fell with a crash. The others turned instantly, their guns rising. "Contact! Another target!" Eli's eyes widened. "Lyra, no, get back!" But she didn't. A beam shot past her shoulder, scorching the wall. She ducked, grabbed the fallen soldier's weapon, and fired blindly. The recoil shook her arms, but the blast hit a control panel. Electric arcs danced through the air, filling the dam with blinding light. Eli ran toward her, shouting over the chaos, "Follow me." They sprinted together through the corridor, chased by alarms and sparks. The ground trembled as the turbines overloaded. Steam hissed from every vent, turning the world into a storm of fire and mist. They burst into a chamber filled with pulsing machinery. Eli slammed the emergency lever, trying to cut the power. "It's stuck," he yelled, pushing with both hands. Lyra grabbed the lever too, their hands side by side. Her strength was fading, but she refused to stop. Together, they pulled, muscles straining, hearts pounding. With a deafening clang, the lever snapped down. The turbines slowed, the lights dimmed, and the dam finally groaned into silence. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the sound of their heavy breathing filled the air. Eli looked at her, eyes wide with disbelief. "You came back," he said quietly. She nodded, smiling faintly through the soot and tears. "You saved me many times," she whispered. "My turn now." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "You're unbelievable." But before they could rest, distant rumbling echoed through the tunnels. More patrols were coming. The explosion had drawn attention. Eli checked the control screen. It flickered weakly, showing a floodgate map. "If we open the dam valves," he muttered, "it'll flood the lower tunnels and block their entry." Lyra frowned. "You can do it?" "Not alone," he said, giving her a determined look. She stepped closer, understanding without words. "Then we do it together." They moved through the dark corridors, climbing ladders and crossing narrow bridges. The wind howled through broken vents, carrying the smell of rain and electricity. When they reached the upper console, lightning flashed through the skylight above. Eli typed commands while Lyra turned manual wheels, her arms shaking from strain. The metal screeched, the locks released, and massive water gates opened below. The river surged, roaring through the dam like a living creature. Outside, the soldiers' transports were swept away by the torrent. The valley filled with rushing water and thunder, erasing their trail completely. Eli watched the monitors, amazed. "We did it." Lyra stood beside him, hair wet, face glowing with triumph. "You did," she said softly. He shook his head, smiling. "No, we did." For a long moment, they just looked at each other, the engineer and the former slave. Two souls who had fought the storm together and won. But as the water settled and silence returned, they both knew this wasn't the end. The company wouldn't stop searching, and soon, the storm outside would be nothing compared to the one coming for them. Still, as Lyra looked out at the rising sun through the broken window, she whispered, "I'm not afraid anymore." Eli smiled. "Good," he said, "because the hardest part is yet to come." The valley was quiet, but not empty. Mist rose from the rushing water below, carrying the scent of wet metal and stone. Lyra stood beside Eli on the edge of the dam, watching the river carve its way through the canyon. Her body ached, her hands were scarred, but she felt alive in a way she had never known. For years, chains had held her, fire had scarred her, and darkness had haunted her every step. Now, she felt the wind against her face and the warmth of sunlight on her skin. She had survived. She had fought. And she had helped someone else survive too. Eli checked the comm panel one last time, ensuring the patrols were disoriented by the flood. "They won't follow us for a while," he said, wiping sweat and soot from his face. Lyra nodded silently, still absorbing the strange sensation of freedom. She looked at him, and for the first time, she saw a reflection of herself. Not a slave, not a frightened girl, but someone alive and capable. Eli crouched beside her, holding out a hand. "Come with me. There's a place where we can be safe." She stared at him for a long moment, her silver eyes glinting with light. For years, no one had offered her hope without asking for something in return. But this human didn't want anything except her life. She took his hand slowly, the first human touch she had ever trusted. The warmth spread through her like fire melting ice. Together, they moved toward the shuttle waiting at the ridge above. The engines hummed softly, a promise of safety and new beginnings. As they climbed aboard, she looked down at the valley below. The floods had destroyed the patrol's path, erasing the marks of her past. The ruins of the dam and mining machines were swallowed by the water. She whispered a soft word in her language, "Freedom." Eli heard it and smiled. "Yes, freedom," he said simply. The shuttle lifted into the sky, leaving Oris, 9 behind. Clouds drifted below them like white oceans, and the twin suns cast golden rays across her face. She felt the wind of the planet fading beneath her, replaced by the hum of the engines. Her body relaxed, her mind slowly letting go of fear. For the first time, she could imagine a life without pain, without cages, without fire. Eli reached over and handed her a small pack of water and rations. She laughed softly, a pure sound. "I don't need this," she said. "Maybe not," he replied, "but it's better to be prepared." She nodded, understanding the wisdom in small acts. As the shuttle crossed the clouds, they talked quietly about distant planets, green fields, oceans, and skies she had never seen. Lyra's voice grew stronger, her words more confident. She realized she had learned more than survival from Eli. She had learned trust, courage, and hope. She had learned that humans could be more than fear and oppression. They could be saviors, friends, and guides through the darkness. Her heart, once heavy with pain, now carried a light she could not have imagined. Hours passed, and the shuttle descended toward a distant colony. It was small, nestled among hills and rivers, but it smelled like life. Other humans and aliens moved freely, building, working, laughing, living. Lyra's eyes widened, absorbing the sight of freedom in its purest form. Eli guided her gently. "This is your choice," he said. "Stay with me, or explore on your own." She thought about the years in the mines, the pain, the endless nights. Then she looked at him, at the man who had risked his life over and over. "I want to live," she whispered, her voice steady. The shuttle landed softly, and she stepped onto solid ground. Every step was new, strange, but exhilarating. Her bare feet touched the soil, grass brushing against her skin for the first time in decades. Eli stayed beside her, hand lightly on her shoulder, guiding, but not controlling. She breathed deeply, filling her lungs with life instead of dust. Around them, life continued, indifferent but welcoming. And for the first time, Lyra knew she belonged somewhere. As night fell over the colony, she looked up at the stars. Silver points shining bright, infinite and eternal. She thought of the mines, of darkness, of fear. And then she remembered Eli's first words to her, "You're safe now." She smiled, truly smiled. The shadows of her past were still there, whispering softly, but they no longer controlled her. For she had learned the greatest lesson of all. Kindness could heal, courage could conquer, and even the smallest human could change the life of an alien girl forever. And under the glow of distant suns, Lyra took Eli's hand. Together, they stepped into a new world. Not as slave and rescuer, not as alien and human, but as two souls who had found hope, courage, and a future among the stars.